As most of you know, Katherine is the Newbery Award-winning author of books like Bridge to Terabithia and The Great Gilly Hopkins, and a host of other titles that have become a part of the canon of children's literature in this country and around the world. She's still writing. In fact, there's a new picture book by Flyaway called The Night of the Bird, which is out now. It's available in the pop-up bookstore unless it has started out. Somebody's shaking their head. No, it's not. It's still there. Go down now. Go. As Newbery authors, Madeleine and Katherine ran in similar circles. So in fact, for a stretch in the late 70s, early 80s, I want to say their titles were honored almost back to back for a while, the Newbery stuff. So 1978, The Great Gilly Hopkins earned a Newbery honor. And then Bring of Endless Light by Madeleine was 1981. Bridge to Terabithia was the medal in 1978. Great Gilly Hopkins, Newbery honor in 1979. And Ring of Endless Light in 1981. So they ran in similar circles. So when in 2012, Macmillan celebrated the 50th anniversary of the publication of A Wrinkle in Time, 5 years after Madeleine's death, Katherine was one of the authors on Macmillan's panel discussion about the significance and impact of Madeleine's book. And Katherine was also the one who wrote the introduction for the 50th anniversary edition. And here is her emphasis on what I think is just a really insightful comment about that book. She wrote of A Wrinkle in Time. In our world, there are the scientifically minded that scoff at the stories told by the religious, and the religiously inclined who refuse to accept the theories of modern science. The first group will wonder how Madeleine L'Engle's intellect could possibly be a Christian, and the second will wonder how a real Christian could set such store by the words of godless scientists. But Madeleine was, first of all, a searcher for truth, and so A Wrinkle in Time draws us into a new kind of thinking. Things are truly not simply what they seem in science or in religion. And if we graduate, as she did, from Newton to Einstein, we might discover that those two worlds are not as far apart as we imagined. Obviously, we can trust her to speak at the Madeleine L'Engle Conference. I first heard Katherine speak at the Festival of Faith and Writing in 2004, and again at another literary conference that same year. And when I introduced myself to her after her keynote at the second conference and said I enjoyed hearing her earlier in the year at the Festival of Faith and Writing also, she was mortified because she had given the same keynote at both places. And I said, no, I was so glad to hear it again, because who can possibly absorb everything coming at you in a keynote? So I was one of the lucky ones who got to hear that keynote twice, and if you do it again today, I'll be in heaven. But of course, if you want to say something unique, you can. But there was a line that you said, Katherine, in that keynote that I will never forget. It has become a kind of mission statement for me, and I think it can be said of Madeleine and for any of us who are in the creative combination, creative worlds of faith and art. You said, and I think it was a throwaway comment that wasn't even the main point of your session, but you said, I want to be a spy for hope. I want to be a spy for hope. And I think for all of us here today, our mission, if we choose to accept it, is to join Katherine's spy ring, which included Madeleine, and become spies for hope ourselves. Will you all join me in welcoming Katherine?
If my husband were still alive, he would have put a note in this notebook of mine which says, is the mic adjusted so that everyone can hear you? And you would be sitting in that corner waving because the mic was not properly adjusted. So I think I see a son back there who needs to take the place of my husband. So you will wave if you can't hear. Thank you. Because if I move my head from side to side, you might miss something. So wave if I move too far. Thank you. The other was, do you have a glass of water? Yes. And the third line on those directions was, I love you so much. not to take his place today, please.
We love you.
Thank you. I was reminded last night about the difference between me and Madeleine, and I might as well start out with that. Charlotte was suggesting that she had heard that Madeleine and I were speaking at the same conference some years ago, and the theme of the conference was, "Do I dare describe the universe?" And Madeleine went, "Yay, of course I dare." And I said, "I hardly dare to disturb my sleeping dog." Now that we've started, when you see where I am at this conference, you will understand that I'm a little shy about speaking in her name. I was born in China on October the 31st, 1932. My father was from Virginia and my mother was from Georgia. So when World War II kicked us out of China, we landed up, of course, in the American South. Now, I'm guessing that there are very few of you here that are as old as I am, and probably not many of you who grew up under the shadow of the Confederacy. So I think I need to explain what that means. First of all, Southern women of my generation, and certainly of my mother's generation, were not supposed to be famous. It was okay for me, maybe, to have written a few small books that nobody paid any attention to, but it was certainly not all right for me to have my picture in the newspaper. And it was really terrible that I won a number of awards in a row. My mother's friends rushed to her, very worried about what had happened to their dear friend's child. It was as though they thought I had come down with a fatal illness, and my mother needed to be comforted. "What will happen to Katherine?" they asked. "You don't need to worry about Katherine," my mother said. "She has plenty to keep her humble." As was often the case, my mother was right. I do have plenty to keep me humble. And if there was any doubt about it, all it took for me was to reread Walking on Water. Now, I had read that book not long after it came out, but that was almost 40 years ago. If I were to address that theme, I would have to reread it. As I read, alas, I was reminded all over again how very intelligent Madeleine was, and how very wise, not to mention how very brave. So believe me, when I stand up here and speak to all of you with her voice echoing in my head, I have plenty to keep me humble, if not a wee bit envious. Maybe that's the reason that when Charlotte asked me about a title for my talk related to the theme Walking on Water, the first thing that popped into my head was, the water is wide. In art, Madeleine says, we're able to do all the things we have forgotten. We're able to walk on water. We speak to the angels who call us. We move unfettered among the stars. Now, of course, Madeleine is speaking like the poet and fantasist she was. But what does that sentence mean to those of us who are of the earth, earthy? Writers like me who certainly look up and wonder at the stars, but do not move unfettered among them, who haven't ever knowingly chatted with an angel, and who do not, even in our imaginations, walk on water. Madeleine's books were attacked because they were fantastic, including magical beings and supernatural realms. Mine are attacked because they're too realistic. Siblings fight, bullies bully, authority is not respected, protagonists lie and cheat, they're cruelly racist, and perhaps worst of all, their speech is sometimes profane. I never could understand why it was worse to have bad words coming out of your mouth than to be cruelly racist. But apparently it is. They are, in short, my books, too much like the human beings we know and perhaps are. Jesse Aaron often emphasizes his thoughts with the exclamation, Lord. His father says that the death of his best friend is hell, which profound grief sometimes feels like. And I think there are about 2 dams in the whole book, although unlike my critics, I haven't gone back and counted. A distraught teacher wrote me to say that she would not allow her Christian school class to read my books. And from now on, she was only going to teach literature from the Bible alone. No, she skipped the books of Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and Judges, to name a few that are appropriate for 10-year-olds to study. Oh yes, she'd better leave out Genesis 2 and the 1st and 2nd Samuel and both books of the Kings while she's at it. Well, you see the problem. The Bible does not spare us from graphic stories of human sin. It tells the sordid truth about the fathers and mothers of our faith. But also, and more importantly, about the God of steadfast love and an abounding mercy that is wider and deeper than the worst of human sin. If you want to write realistic fiction, you have to tell the truth about human nature. Flannery O'Connor says that fiction is about everything human, and we are made out of dust. And if you scorn getting yourself dusty, then you shouldn't write fiction. It isn't grand enough for you. At a book convention not too long ago, I stopped by a booth to speak to a friend of mine who was signing there. As I was leaving, one of the staff caught up with me. Katherine, she said, when you write a faith-based book, we'd love to see it. Thank you for laughing. I didn't say anything. I was too startled. What do you think I've been doing for nearly 50 years? I thought all my books were faith-based. I don't know that a publisher's representative, and I certainly can't judge her. But I think she wanted me to know that as a Christian writer, I was failing the cause. Because I hate to think of myself as an unreliable witness. I'd rather believe that she was looking for propaganda rather than a story. Now, the word propaganda has a bad connotation, but actually it is simply the systematic spreading of a particular set of beliefs. Now, I have written Christian propaganda, and I hope it was good propaganda, telling the good news of my faith. But propaganda is not a story. When I write a story, I'm struggling as a person of faith with a question. When I'm standing in the pulpit, I'm setting out to share a message. In writing a story, I'm struggling, I'm searching for meaning, and that search and that struggle turn into the book that I'm writing. Each reader gets to decide for him or herself if there is a message in the story for them. I do not get that privilege. I know what the story means to me, but I'm the only person that I can give that message to. I love Barbara Brown Taylor's description of Jesus as a storyteller. She points out how courteous Jesus' stories are, how respectful of the listener. And then she goes on to say, story and image both have great pockets of silence in them. They do not come at the ear the same way advice and exhortation do, although they are, I believe, even more persuasive. Perhaps that is because stories create a quiet space where one may lay down one's defenses for a while. A story does not ask for decision. Instead, it asks for identification, which is how transformation begins. Love that. And that, if I may say so, is what I would love for my stories to accomplish. I want to invite young readers to come in for a while and lay their defenses, lay their burdens down. I don't want to place more burdens upon their narrow shoulders. And what do I mean when I claim to be a writer who is a Christian? Why did I want to say that day, though I didn't, because I was too startled to reply, that all my books are faith-based? It's simply because my life is based on my faith, and I can only write out of my own life and experience. Anne Lamott, who's written a lot about faith, says the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. Why, if you're certain, would you need faith? Doubt just means you're alive and asking questions. Just look at the Bible. All the patriarchs, psalmists, prophets, saints ask God questions. We see the virtuous Job shaking his fists at the heavens, demanding an answer to that age-old question, why do the righteous suffer? But it is Job that God approves of. Job's friends, the unquestioning believers who come spouting the current orthodox judgments, are the ones that God reproves. Some years ago, I remember asking my preacher husband, why is it that every time I see the word Christian used as an adjective, I get the creeps? And if it bothered me a few years ago, you can just imagine how I feel these days. When many who call themselves Christians are standing back without a murmur while lunches are no longer provided for hungry children, and desperate parents seeking safety for their children have them taken away and put into cages. The word evangelical, folks, indicates that you belong to those who have heard and believed the gospel, the good news that Jesus spoke and better yet lived. Unless I become self-righteous, what have I done in my 87 years to follow Jesus, whose few years on earth were spent healing the sick, befriending the outcast, and telling ordinary and forgotten people stories of God's loving kingdom. Well, she says weekly, I write stories. And even though many like that publisher's representative do not get the message of faith when they read my stories, these stories come from the deepest part of me, where I live in the wonder of God's amazing grace. I was once at a retreat where the leader asked each of us, when do you feel closest to God? The participants were saying things like, when I'm praying, or when I'm in nature, or when I look into the face of a child. I blurted out, when I'm working. Didn't seem probably pious, but it was true. That's when the rhinoceros hide of what I want others to think of me and how I want to think about myself, all the accretions of my false self fall away, and I'm immersed in something larger and warmer than my small, naked being. And if I reflect on that experience, I think that perhaps it is in the loss of all that is exterior, whether honor or shame, that lets me, at least for a time, become the child that God intended. And that child writes stories for the young. This doesn't mean that any of my books will be dictated by angels. Though when I look back on a book once it's published, it seems as though it was all a gift. And yet when I'm writing a book, I'm working as hard as I can. So I have to admit to the paradox. It's all gift, and it's all work. Very Calvinistic of me, isn't it? When I was trying to learn how to be a writer, I would go to conferences and lectures and listen to well-known authors talking about their books. And I was sitting there muttering in my head as they would lay out some fantastic description of their writing process. When I had become a real writer, I would say to myself, I'm not going to talk hokey. But I now hear myself talking hokey with the best of them. Because there is something mysterious, even miraculous, about creativity. When I'm asked, as I often am, to describe my writing process, I simply don't know how to begin. I'm not even sure I know what's meant by that question as it applies to me. The word process seems to imply order. A factory worker could explain a manufacturing process. A biologist could explain the digestive process. But heaven help me. I can't begin to explain the messy, mysterious, miraculous process by which a book of mine is eventually written. But as I was writing that last sentence, it occurred to me that I could tell you the story of how my newest book got written. Hasn't been published yet, and it will, I'm sure, go through more revisions before it finally is. But at least how it came to be is still fresh in my mind. Now, if that is my writing process, good luck trying to learn from it. Because for one thing, my so-called process changes with every single book. But here I go. Some years ago, or should I say once upon a time, I had a picture in my mind of a little girl of about 10 or 11. She's wearing a slightly grubby white t-shirt that has a big red heart on it and the slogan, I heart Jesus. Well, you might be thinking she's finally written a faith-based book. Lots of that. The child who seems to go by the name Birdie is standing in the middle of the street, watching a car drive away and bawling her own heart out. I made a stab at 3 or 4 first chapters, none of which went anywhere. So Birdie in her I Heart t-shirt was stuck in the middle of that road for years. I am, and I say this proudly for those of you who know what I'm talking about, I am a trustee of the Vermont College of Fine Arts and currently live less than 10 minutes from the campus in Montpelier. Since I've never had a chance to study creative writing, it has been my joy and education to drop in on lectures about writing for the young. One lecture sent me racing home to fix a major problem in the book I was writing my previous year. Then the summer of 2018, I had the pleasure of joining 15 students and 2 faculty members of the Writing for Children and Young Adults program for their summer term in, I say Bath, but they say Bath, England. Now, I have always learned something from the wonderful faculty at VCFA, and I knew 10 days in Bath Spa would immerse me, pun intended, in the how-to course in writing that I've always longed to take. I thought perhaps paying no tuition behind a brief presentation, I shouldn't horn in on the workshops, but the students and faculty members all assured me that I was welcome. David Gill gave a workshop on story building, just what I need. Consisted of outlining your novel as a play and writing every element your drama needed on a Post-it note that you stuck in the proper place in the drama. I wasn't working on a book of fiction then, so I had to pretend that the Birdie in the I Heart Jesus t-shirt was actually a book that I was working on. I began to think up stuff about Birdie and her I Heart Jesus t-shirt. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I scribbled away on Post-it notes so everybody else in the workshop would think I was busy. And then I remembered a long unwritten book idea. It was about a timid child whose only friend, the one who takes over her life, turns out to be a pathological liar. Like every writer, I'm always asked, where do you get your ideas? Well, the clutching lying friend comes from several episodes in my own life. I was repeatedly the shy new child, easy pickings for a classmate with an appetite for domination. One of those girls in my childhood was indeed a pathological liar. What would happen if poor, needy Birdie met a pathological liar who took over her daily life? As I often tell folks, one idea doth not a novel make. Neither of those long neglected ideas ever became a book, but together, The fall of 2018 was a busy one devoted to a nonfiction project, but I figured I should get done with that by Christmas. I decided I would begin the new novel in the new year. About the second week in January, I sat down at my desk with David Gill's schema and Post-it notes in 4 different colors. It looked pretty hopeless, to tell you the truth. I had 2 beginnings. Should I begin the book with her bawling in the middle of the street, or with her chance meeting with the blind friend? Time to follow your own advice, I said. Write 2 pages a day. Now this excellent advice, which I gave myself many years ago, but forget to take, goes back to 1980, when I was trying without much success to write a book called Rebels of the Heavenly Kingdom. The war and the killing in 19th century China simply got too much for me. When the protagonist discovers that he's killed a baby, I couldn't go any further. Now, I didn't want to read that book myself, so how could anybody else ever want to read it? But I had a problem. I had left my family wifeless and motherless and taken the lion's share of the family budget to go to China for 3 weeks so I could look and smell and search for clues to this 19th century history. We had one child already in a private college and another who had been accepted at a far more expensive college, and 2 more children who would have to be educated. I felt terrible about abandoning the book. We really needed the money, but I had to face facts. And to do so, I would have to confess to my husband. I finally got up the nerve to go into the living room and interrupt my husband, who was peacefully reading the day's newspaper. I was very anxious. I knew how badly we needed that money that I had wasted. I'd already spent the money and wasted more than a year of working time, and I had nothing now to show for it. "John," I said. My shaky voice made him lower the paper and look at me over his reading glasses, ready for what must be terrible news. "I'm really sorry, but I'm never, ever going to finish that book." "Oh," he says, "you've reached that point." He lifted his paper and went right back to where he was reading. I was furious. How dare he imply that this devastating life crisis was something that to him seemed to occur in the middle of every book I had written. I marched into my study. "I'll show him," I said. 2 pages a day. You can do 2 pages a day, no requirement for quality. The margins can be wide, the font large, but 2 pages a day, and then you can get up and do something else. So, when I sat down in mid-January of 2019, it was with those old self-instructions ringing in my ears. 2 pages, and then you can get up and do something else. Dramatic pause. Then a miracle occurred. Mid-February, Valentine's Day to be exact, after dutifully doing my 2 pages, I went out into frozen Vermont to walk my dog. I slipped on ice hidden under the snow and broke my left femur and ankle. Now, some of you might not regard a broken leg and ankle as a miracle, and at the time, I would have agreed. But looking back, I can only be grateful for the housekeeper who saw me fall, the staff that quickly gathered, the EMTs that transported me to the hospital, the surgeon who was so skillful that everyone who looks at my x-rays marvels, my children who came and gave me of their time and energy to care for me. And somebody said, "Boy, you're lucky to have 4 children." And I was. They all put in their time. And when they finally had to go back to their own jobs and families, the paid caregivers, whom I may not have adored as much as I did my children, but who were competent, and I was able to pay for it with a little financial juggling. And the fact, when I stand here today, I'm in amazingly good shape for an 87-year-old lady. Miracle enough for 1 year. But wait, there's more. During the early period, when I was wheelchair bound, son David made sure I had a set of barbells and lectured me on exercises to strengthen my arms so I could propel the living chair. Then son John came and brought me a new table with an attached keyboard to which I could easily wheel the chair. The state of my body, apparently, was no excuse for lying in my recliner and reading all day, which I had thought was what I could do when I was I gave myself a post-surgery week or so before I propelled my chair to the new desk setup. John had located it in front of a window that looks out on the Green Mountains and the Worcester Range of Vermont. Okay, I said to my crippled self, I know you're feeling poorly, sweetie, but just 2 pages a day. 2 measly pages. The margins can be wide, the font large, and there is no requirement for quality. 2 pages, and then you can go back to your recliner and read for the rest of the day. Well, of course, with hardly any interruptions, in a little while, I was doing more than the required 2 pages. And then, slowly, I was falling in love with my crazy little Christian, with all her doubts and fears and her lying, manipulative friend. I had a book that was written and sufficiently revised so that I had the nerve to send it to my wonderful Jewish agent. To my delighted surprise, she loved my crazy little Christian. And after I cleaned up the typos, misspellings, and rewritten a few scenes, Susan sent it on to my great editor. With I'm sure, more revisions, it will actually be published in a year or so. Try to tell me that isn't a miracle. Now that you realize that even with this one book, I have anything that faintly resembles a proper writing process, it is certainly not a model any rational person would choose to emulate. And you do not have to break your leg to write a book. But the real miracle of a book is not that it gets written and eventually published. The real miracle happens when a reader finds in your book something they need at that precise moment for their own lives. When I'm talking to students, I'll ask how many of them play a musical instrument. Many hands go up. Okay, I said, when your director or conductor hands you a sheet of music, is that music? No. It's just black squiggles on a white page. It only becomes music when you take that sheet and begin to sing or play an instrument. In the same way, my book is only black squiggles on a page, sandwiched between covers, gathering dust on a shelf, until you take it down and bring to it your own ability to read, your life experience, your emotions, and your imagination. Without readers, I'm helpless as a writer. I have to have readers to make music for my black squiggles. So when students ask me, what is the best thing about being an author? Having readers, I answer. And over the years, readers have taught me truths about my books, the books that they have co-authored with me, that have humbled and enlightened me. There was a young woman who waited until the auditorium emptied before coming up to speak to me. She said she had traveled a couple hundred miles to meet me because she needed to tell me that Bridge to Terabithia had saved her life when she was a child. She told me her harrowing story. As long as she could remember, she said, she'd been sexually abused by a member of her family. She thought incest was how all families operated until she started school and began to make friends and visit other people's houses. She gradually realized that something was not quite right about what was happening at her house. It was a dark secret. Then one day, she came to school and discovered that her name and her family's secret had been chalked in huge capital letters on the sidewalk in front of the building for everyone to see when they came to school. She thought she would die of shame. But then she remembered what Leslie had said to Janice Avery when she found her crying in the girls' room. Just pretend you don't know what on earth they're talking about or where they got such a crazy story, and everybody will forget about it in a week. So she said, instead of turning around and running home, I decided I could do that for a week. And I stood up straight and marched into the building. She had gotten counseling after she left home, and healing had taken time, but now she had a good life and her own family. She'd driven across the state when she heard that I would be speaking there, because she had to thank me for helping her get through the hardest week of her life. I didn't write that book. It was written by a courageous young woman that I'll never see again, but certainly will never forget. In an essay on story, Barry Lopez says that stories are important to us insofar as they sustain us with illumination and heal us. I would love to think that that's what the stories I write. I certainly know it's what happens in the stories I read. I can only hope that readers like that nameless young woman will find in my stories light and healing for themselves. That is what Jesus spent his life doing, bringing light and healing into a dark and suffering world. On another occasion, a woman identified herself to me as the librarian in a prison for juveniles. Our facility is not for runaways and shoplifters, she said. Our children have committed violent crimes. One day a girl returned a copy of The Great Billy Hopkins to the library. She slapped the book down on my desk. "This is me," she said. A story does not ask for decision, Barbara Brown Taylor said. Instead, it asks for identification, which is how transformation begins. I don't know how that child's story ends, but it begins in identification with a fictional child as angry as herself and a caring librarian that she already knows she can trust with her anger. I was at a conference that was running behind schedule and being hurried toward the platform to make my speech when a young woman leapt into the aisle and grabbed my arm. "I'm doing a dissertation at the University of Chicago on Southern right settings in children's literature, and I must know, who is Mamie Trotter?" My escort had my other arm trying to pull me toward the stage. So I said as I moved away, "God!" I couldn't tell by the look on the young woman's face if they believed in God at the University of Chicago. And I was fairly certain that they didn't think she spoke with a Southern accent. When Kathy Bates and I were being jointly interviewed on the film set for The Great Billy Hopkins, I told this story. And I wasn't sure Kathy wanted to be compared to God. She said her performance had been inspired by her niece, who was a wonderful foster mother. Whatever and however Kathy did it, she is simply wonderful in the role, and I hope all of you will see this movie if you haven't already. I've seen it 21 times. Seriously, I cried every time. Dear Kathy, I wrote, I just want to say to you what I say to everyone else these days. For 40 years, Mamie Trotter has been my favorite of all my book characters. But now, when I picture her, I see her as Kathy Bates revealed her. Thank you more than I can say. And she replied, Dear Katherine, thank you for your kind words. It means a lot to me that you are happy with my interpretation of a truly heroic woman. Especially in these terrible times, it is important to realize that one right-minded, compassionate, and determined person can make a difference by shaping the destiny of a child. We need more examples of this love in our world. Eventually, I discovered that Birdie and the I Heart Jesus t-shirt is bawling because her father's guard unit is on its way to Iraq, and she is sure he is going to die. Later that day, Birdie decides that instead of tears and belligerence, she will make a bargain with God. If God will keep her daddy safe, she'll be good. She'll really heart Jesus and love God and be their faithful witness in the world. At first, it seems to work. She begins to notice things around her that she takes to be evidence that God is keeping God's side of the bargain. And then halfway through, everything falls apart. Her one friend proves beyond doubt to be a manipulative liar. Her father is horribly wounded and may not survive. God has definitely not kept his side of the bargain. Birdie feels she has to choose between believing in a God who is a cruel monster or deciding that there is no God at all. Now, when I'm writing Birdie's story, I have to take a break to write a sermon I had promised to deliver. The sermon is based on the lectionary passage in which Paul speaks of the mystery that has been hidden for the ages but is now revealed to the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Two very powerful words, hope and glory. So I begin to spend as much time as I can to discover what those words mean. And as I begin researching the word glory, I come across the description of a phenomenon in nature that I had never heard of before. I stop writing my sermon exactly at that point and go back to Birdie's story. A doubtful, fearful Birdie is aboard an airplane for the first time in her life. She's not sure whether she is more afraid of flying or of seeing her severely damaged and possibly mortally wounded father. Just when she needs God most, she has pretty much decided that he doesn't exist. When on the flight, she finally gets up nerve to look out the window. She sees fields and forests, mountains and lakes, and then they're flying above the clouds. And suddenly, Birdie saw something so wonderful, so amazingly beautiful, that she could hardly breathe. The shadow of the plane had fallen on the clouds below, and there was a rainbow surrounding the shadow like a halo. A rainbow was God's promise to Noah that everything would be all right. She sat back against the seat. Her heart was beating fast, not with fear, but with a strange kind of excitement. Weeks later, she told Graham about it. "Oh, how wonderful," Graham said. "You saw a glory." "A glory?" "Yes, that's what scientists call that halo phenomenon." "A glory?" Reverend Colston had told them that glory was the presence of God. But it made sense to her, looking back on that flight to Washington. In the film, The Shack, the Jesus character takes Mac to a river. They have to go to the other side, for there is something Mac must see there, Jesus says. Mac looks at the river, and the water is indeed wide. He knows he can't swim that far. "That's not a problem," Jesus says, and takes Mac's arm, and they walk across the river to the other side. Then, when Mac is ready to return, he steps confidently into the water and immediately sinks up to his knees. When he turns back in dismay, Jesus, who is still on the bank, grins at him. "It works better when we go together," Jesus says. And splashing and laughing like joyful little boys at play, the two of them race across to the other side.